That evening, Joe found Sophie standing outside the children's bedroom, her hand resting lightly on the doorknob. He was going to say something, but she put her finger on her lips, and he went to the living room. Minutes later, she came through, saying in a hushed voice, "I've been listening to a story." "One of Hannah's?" he asked. "One of Hannah's." She sat down at her spinning wheel, picking up some combed brown wool, which would eventually become Joe's pullover for the next winter. It was a weird story about some giant ewe with a fleece 2 meters long, made of silver clouds. She spread the wool in her hands and laughed. Imagine spinning a yarn like that. "Did the ewe have some name like Hannibal Brontosaurus?" asked Joe. "You've heard the story?" "Not from Hannah. Sky fills me in from time to time. It's ongoing, a fairy tale soap opera. She's constructed a sort of mythology around the skeleton of that old ewe lying on the rock in the creek." "It sounded way over the top," said Sophie. "I worry about that child. I used to think she'd grow out of her wild imagination, but it seems to be getting wilder as she gets older." "It's born in her," said Joe, sitting down to comb wool for Sophie's spinning. "Your Scottish mother and my Māori grandmother, both women of creative power. The two streams have converged in Hannah. I hope we do the right things to encourage it." "Encourage it?" Sophie fed yarn into her bobbin, her foot working the treadle. Clack, clack, clack. "She lives in a world of superstition." "Well, most people have a certain amount of superstition in them," Joe said easily. "I always reckon that superstition holds the seeds for inner growth." "It can go the other way," Sophie said. Joe, who had himself inherited much from his grandmother, laughed. "Labels belong to the people who use them. Hannah's a healthy little girl with a wonderful imagination, and if this world needs anything, it's imagination." Sophie's spinning slowed. In her story tonight, this giant sheep was going on a journey with an old horse. When the horse got tired, the sheep carried him. When the horse got hungry, the sheep fed him. At the end, the horse got so old it was going to die. The sheep wrapped him in a rainbow and made him young again. "Oh, that's beautiful," said Joe, "and it tears me up inside. I know how much she loves Shadrach. I felt terrible when I saw him walk into the float like that. Complete trust. I wanted to take him out again and give him the dignity of death and burial on this place." The spinning wheel stopped. "Joe, she keeps nagging about a trip to Nelson to see him." "I know." Joe put the combed wool in the basket beside her. He was about to take some more fleece from the sack when the phone in the kitchen rang. "I'll get it," he said. He left the door open, and above the clatter of the wheel, Sophie heard isolated phrases. Joe was very concerned about something, and the words sorry and bad luck came through to her. Then she heard the name Neil. She thought that Shadrach had died somewhere on the journey. Poor old Shadrach. Tears came to her eyes. Of all the family, she was probably the least attached to the old horse, but because they'd bought him soon after their marriage, he was a part of what she and Joe had created together. Moving to the bay, clearing scrub and thistles, fencing land, establishing gardens, building sheds, having babies, one season of fruitlessness flowing into another, and Shadrach had always been there. He was so gentle, the quietest stallion they'd ever known, and perhaps the ugliest, with his huge head and overdeveloped mouth. He was better suited to a freak show than a circus, someone remarked when they got him. He was a people horse, especially good with children. She thought of all the times he'd opened the bar of the gate with his teeth and then gone round to the children's bedroom window. When Hannah was only 4, she would climb out the window directly onto his back, no saddle or reins. Sophie stopped spinning and got up for a tissue. She was blowing her nose when Joe came back. "That was Neil. Guess what?" She couldn't say anything. "He did break an axle after all." "A broken axle?" "Yes, on the float." "Shadrach's all right?" she asked. "Okay, I think. The horses are in a holding paddock for the night and the float's up on a jack. Neil's in Havelock making phone calls, wanting to know what he should do to keep the muscles fresh. I told him to keep them wet." "Can they fix it?" "There's a new part coming from Nelson in the morning and he'll be away by lunchtime, he says. His main problem is that he's worried about his boss. He'll lose his job if they find out he came here to pick up Shadrach. Poor Neil. Did he say how it happened? On a rough patch of road near Linkwater. Joe rubbed the side of his neck. I feel badly about it. He said he'd break an axle and I assured him he wouldn't. Is he going to take Shadrach the rest of the way? Yes, he said he would. The road from Linkwater to Nelson's in good shape. Sophie said, if his boss did find out, maybe we could pay for Neil's time and damage to the float. That's not the problem, said Joe. It's Lacemaker. Taking her anywhere is a bit like having the Queen on board. You don't make detours with royalty. Imagine if Lacemaker had gone over a bank. Thank goodness they didn't, said Sophie. Hey, are you all right? Joe was looking closely at her. She laughed softly. When I heard you on the phone, I thought Shadrach was dead. Silly, wasn't it? Then she said, we won't tell the children about this. No, he replied. The less said on the subject of Shadrach, the better. Sophie started spinning again. Before the phone went, we were talking about Hannah. She keeps asking about a trip to Nelson to see him. Yes, and she doesn't let up. We'll have to tell her something. Wait a few days, said Joe. Then we'll tell them all that Shadrach has died.